Hello there and welcome to episode 4 of our Dreamcast reviews. Today we'll be looking at Yeah Beebis 2, game which I've purchased with my own money, so no free gifts or donations here. It gives me the opportunity to obviously give you my honest thoughts about the game and whether I regret buying it or if I think it's a really good addition to your Dreamcast library. The first thing to note about Yeah Beebis 2 is that it's a game that was originally designed for the NES. There's been a sort of explosion in NES games being transferred over to the Dreamcast recently. We've had Flea, we've had Ghoul Grind and Tapeworm, and all of these games have sort of been a bit put off in terms of buying them for the Dreamcast because you're sort of paying £25 to £30 for a game that's really sort of been designed for an 8-bit machine and not the full powerhouse of the Dreamcast. So what attracted me to buy Yeah Beebis 2? Well, I guess the fact that Waves had a sale and were only charging $9.99 for the game was one major factor. The other thing though was it had quite an interesting title. It sort of links back to this mystical game for the NES, Yeah Beebis, which was advertised in the mail order companies in the sort of gaming magazines back when the NES was popular. But it was a game that never sort of materialised, and there was sort of became this holy grail as NES collectors sort of tried to find out what the game was, whether it was a real game or whether it was a title that had been translated from a Japanese title. And then over the years it sort of became a whole sort of quest and search for what the game was or what the game could have been, and therefore it's a bit of a sort of a tongue-in-cheek title name that's been given to this game by the developer John Rigg. Talking of John Rigg, he sort of coordinated and sort of marketed the game. He wasn't really sort of involved in the programming. Instead, he sort of pulled together on his contacts. So I think Mega Cat Studios were the main sort of creative force in terms of doing the game design, doing the programming, and I think did pretty much most of the sort of graphics for the game. And then obviously John Rigg's got contacts with musicians and called on them to add some really good music files to the game. He's also got other sort of contacts in the industry and knew a really fantastic artist who produced some wonderful designs for the CD inlays and the packaging, which were all produced to a really high commercial standard. Although the packaging is produced to a really high standard, one criticism I do have of the included CD booklet is that it doesn't contain any sort of instructions about the game or even include a simple breakdown of the power-ups. You sort of just collect them because they appear on the screen and you sort of assume that they will be a positive experience on your game. It would have been nice to sort of know in advance if these things are worth sort of going out of your way to collect. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the gameplay. The game starts with obviously a simple title screen where you've got the option of choosing which of the two characters you want to play as. For some bizarre reason I always select the first one, and his sort of ability is that he zaps the evil enemies. There is a two-player option, which obviously just has both of you on the screen trying to kill all the enemies. Once you've selected which character you're going to play, or if you're going to go for the two-player option, you're straight into a single screen game. It's a very simplistic game. It's basically zap, kill the enemies and kill the certain amount of them within a time frame, and then you can move on to the next level. I don't have a particular problem with the simplistic gameplay. In fact, sort of thinking back to my childhood, really enjoy the sort of single screen arcade games, things like Asteroids, Pac-Man, and moving on later on things like Rodland. So really enjoy that sort of type of game, and I think Yeah Beebis 2 sort of captures that spirit, and it really does feel like a game that could have come out in the 80s, and it's sort of a real sort of tribute to those types of game. Also the music, they've chosen to use sort of classical music, and sort of remember back into like the 80s there was a lot of classical tunes used in computer games, mainly because it was free to use. You don't have to pay any sort of copyright to use those tunes, and it really fits this game well. One thing that is a bit frustrating though is climbing up ladders. You don't sort of climb up and down ladders, you can only seem to sort of hop upwards, and then to go down you sort of just fall. That's just a bit weird and a bit frustrating because you're not sort of moving up them quickly or descending down them quickly, and as the game is up against a sort of time bit, it really does make it quite frustrating in terms of using those. Another minor frustration is the background graphics. It's a bit unclear as to what things are going to hurt you or cause you damage. There are some things that are they spikes, are there flames? You sort of just assume that you should avoid them. It's mainly due to the limitations of the NES and the software that was used to create this game. You're not going to have lots of animated sprites on the game, and therefore you just have to accept that as a limitation. I must admit though, I did actually enjoy playing this game more than I thought I was going to. I think it is just because it's that sort of simplistic game. You have to kill a certain amount of enemies within the time frame to move on, so you don't really have to think too much about it, and it is that sort of initial challenge of you giving it that one more go because you think, oh, I was so close, I only missed out by a couple of seconds, or I only had one more enemy to sort of kill. And it does have that sort of addictive hook to it, which is going to make you sort of want to keep playing it for longer than you really anticipated at first. In terms of my final thoughts of the game and whether I'd recommend it to people to buy, I think it all sort of comes down to whether you enjoyed those old-fashioned sort of single-screen arcade games of the 80s. If you love that type of game, simplistic controls, not having to overthink things, just kill everything on the screen within the time limit and move on, repeat until you complete the game, you're going to be happy with it, and it does have that sort of addictive one more go to it. I must admit, I'm glad I only paid $9.99 for it. I think with the sort of NES games that are coming over to the Dreamcast, charging sort of £25-30 for it does seem slightly excessive. I think some might have a sort of cheaper option to download the sort of NES file, and if you're that desperate to play those games, maybe sort of doing it via emulation might be a cheaper option to do. It is nice to have some new Dreamcast games coming out, but I wouldn't really want the Dreamcast to suddenly become awash with loads and loads and loads of NES games. But it was a game that pleasantly surprised me, but not enough to make me want to sort of rush out and buy every other single NES game that's currently been converted to the Dreamcast. Okay, hope you found the review interesting. Add some comments if you've bought any of the NES games, or if you've bought this one, and let me know what you think of it.